So I thought that before I got started, I would just tell you a little bit about my backstory, about how I got into healthcare design. So I'm not a designer, I'm not an architect. I studied communications in college and journalism. And I was working as an editor for Contract Magazine, as a lowly associate editor for Contract Magazine in 1987 when I met Wayne Ruga at a conference in San Francisco. Now, Wayne was a healthcare architect who had decided that he was going to start a conference on healthcare design. And I was like any editor, I said, oh, great, send me information on it. And he did. He sent me information. He got me involved in the conference. It was the Symposium on Healthcare Facility Design, which actually that's what it's called now, but it was a healthcare design symposium back then. He sent me information, but he also got me involved on the advisory board. He invited me to be the MC of the event. I didn't even know what an MC was. I was really young, but I did this, and that became what started, this 30-plus year of my career of working in healthcare and senior living as a writer in the design field, as a writer and a marketing consultant, and also along the line with Wayne and others. I was one of the founding board members of the Center for Health Design. And if you're not familiar with that, it's a nonprofit research and education and advocacy organization that looks at how the design of the physical environment can impact patient and staff outcomes. And so I also worked as a consultant to the center, and I later worked as an employee and so forth. And so I was really involved in sort of helping that organization grow for many years. But what I do now, as Nicole mentioned, I write a blog about healthcare and senior living trends, design trends, and I also do a lot of content curating on LinkedIn and Twitter. I do speaking gigs like this, and then I also provide marketing consulting services to companies and organizations in the healthcare and senior living design sector. And in my spare time, I play tennis. So I play competitive tennis. This is me and one of my partners, June, and when we won a tournament a few years ago. And I've also taken up pickleball. So pickleball is like, the fastest growing racket sport in America. How many people have played pickleball? I mean, it's pretty fun too. So, but enough about me. Let's get going. I think, to talk about trends, it's useful to kind of, first look at what exactly is a trend. Well, here's a definition. And it's something that's a prevailing tendency that is gaining momentum. And it's different than a fad, because a fad is kind of a short-term burst of interest or being. And in popular culture, fads are things like Gangnam-style dancing, which I'm not going to demonstrate for you because I don't know how to do it. Beanie Babies. I just lugged a big box of Beanie Babies from my basement that my son had collected, and he doesn't want any of them, and you can't sell them, so they basically are just, going in the garbage. Mood rings, remember those? And big hair, bell bottoms. There's a lot of fashion fads that come and go. But trends in healthcare, trends in popular culture are things like healthy eating, and right now there's a trend of renting instead of buying. Home and working from home is a big trend, we all know. That's not going away. And also the sharing economy, we all do with Uber and Airbnb. But the 5 trends that I'm going to talk about today mostly fall into the socioeconomic category. And ironically, some of them were mentioned in the roundtable this morning. So they're not necessarily things that are new to you, but what I hope I'm going to be able to do is give you a different way of thinking about these ideas. And they all have implications for healthcare facility planning, design, and in some cases, construction as well. So the first one is embodied carbon footprint. And this was one of the topics that was discussed earlier this morning. But everybody's aware of what it is and that how it's different than operational carbon, which is focused mostly on energy consumption. But embodied carbon is really, the manufacture, transport, and installation of materials and products. And not just building materials and products, but things that go into the building. And what's really interesting is that healthcare's operational carbon footprint in this country and around the world is huge, but the embodied carbon footprint of interiors, just interiors, may be responsible for emissions at least equal to or half or more than those from the building structure or envelope. So that's something that's kind of a new idea that I want you to start thinking about, because yes, the building structure is something that costs a lot of money. There's a lot of embodied carbon in the manufacture of concrete and so forth, but there's a lot also in the interiors of the buildings that you are planning and designing and constructing. So, and the reason for that is because of the number of renovations. I mean, that's kind of easy to understand, right? I mean, when you think of a building's lifespan of 30 to 40 years, the number of renovations that might undergo, and particularly in healthcare, I mean, because there's so many different kinds of spaces and the needs change and so forth. So there's really no data that exists on the number of renovations that a typical healthcare facility or hospital might undergo. But there is data about how much is spent on renovations every year, and these are numbers from a couple of years ago, because I think that the recent Modern Healthcare Survey just came out. But of the almost $30 billion that was spent in healthcare construction in 2021, nearly $5 billion was spent on renovations. So that's a lot of embodied carbon. And the healthcare industry is doing a lot to look at its carbon footprint, and there's several initiatives in the industry that are underway, but most of them are focused on reducing energy consumption. So one is an initiative called the Healthcare Climate Challenge, which is an initiative of the nonprofit Healthcare Without Harm. And this is a great organization. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. And a lot of hospitals and health centers around the world have joined this challenge and are using the resources of Healthcare Without Harm to really map out their strategy for reducing their carbon footprint. So are any of your hospitals or health systems part of this? Do you know? I bet some are. It'd be interesting maybe to find out. So another is the health sector climate challenge or pledge, which is an initiative of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in partnership with the Biden administration, and they're asking hospitals and health systems and other industry stakeholders, people like medical equipment manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies and so forth, to take a voluntary pledge to reduce their emissions by, I think it's half by 2030, and reach zero emissions by 2050. So again, this is another pledge that's out there. Anybody know if your hospital or health system has signed it? Well, I bet some of them have, because here's the numbers on it. So about 872 hospitals, as well as 200 federal hospitals and health facilities, have signed this pledge so far. These are two very important initiatives, and are helping to raise awareness within the sector of this. But interestingly enough, last year, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, specifying low-carbon building materials and products is now part of our federal government strategy to reduce carbon emissions. And it includes funding specifically for building material transparency and labeling to support the specification of lower carbon products. But I believe that the current focus is mostly on the building structure, the building materials, and not necessarily on the things I talked about a few minutes ago with interiors, which is where it could go next. And I think The immediate impact of this act is going to be obviously most felt quickly within the federal government, but that will soon trickle down to other private projects, and I think will have an impact. So we all know why this matters, but here's a chart from the CDC that links the different health problems to climate change. And, but the issue is that there has been a disconnect between the health of the planet and the health of the people. So this is another reason why it's really important to pay attention to this. And it's a reason why the World Health Organization thinks that climate change is the biggest health threat, single threat facing humanity. So, and as health care organizations, it makes a lot of sense to look at this as something to pay attention to. But I think this whole notion of reducing embodied carbon footprint, particularly looking at the interiors, is kind of the next step in getting to net zero emissions. And it should be done in tandem with everything else in terms of looking at reducing energy consumption and reducing building materials, embodied carbon. But I think that's why I think it's a trend, because I don't think a lot of people are focusing on it yet, but they should be. All right, so the next thing, which was also talked about this morning, was ESG. But I'm looking at ESG investing, and the standpoint of these investors that want to invest in organizations that have strong ESG policies. And ESG used to be kind of this buzzword, and nobody kind of really, they thought it was just kind of a passing fad. But it's now become, as we talked about earlier this morning, an important framework for healthcare organizations to implement. A big reason for this is because many healthcare real estate trusts, the REITs that fund the capital projects that many of you are doing, they're looking for organizations that have strong ESG policies. So, and organizations that have a history of aligning their operations to support programs that benefit not only the environment, as shown here, but also their employees, the local communities, and their stakeholders. So there's 3 prongs to ESG, and environment is only one part of it, which that's the part that you're the most involved with, but I contend that you also can play a role in the other 3 pillars as well, because I think there's no doubt that the facilities that you are designing and building can help attract ESG investors. But here's how it breaks down, the pillars. So ESG environment is about creating healthy buildings. And by a healthy building, I mean ones that do not harm people or the planet. So many of you are looking at sustainability, you're looking at reducing carbon footprint, your energy impact, but are you looking at how you're reducing, you're creating more wellness environments for the people that work in your buildings? So it's about sustainable design, it's about energy efficient design, and it's about wellness design, which includes things like safety and health of the occupants. So people are talking about healthy buildings, but I'm not sure that everybody's defining them as ones that do not harm people or the planet. And so then the second tier is this idea of social. And I believe that facility design and construction can affect the social determinants of health, such as climate health inequities and access to care, access to nutritional foods, and even promoting physical activity. And so this means looking at the facilities that you're planning and designing and constructing from a resiliency standpoint. How are they equitable? This notion of neurodiversity is something that's quite new, we all have different ways of looking at the world. We're all neurodiverse, so how do we design our spaces that address people of all neurodiversity types? And then accessibility. So this makes the important case for universal design again. I think this is a lovely hotel that we're staying in, but I was shocked that my bathtub, is this slippery bathtub, and it has no grab bars. Now, I don't know whether they haven't put them in yet, but you know, that's just my little own pet peeve that I thought I would mention today. So anyway, the third thing is governance. And you know, governance is really about the leadership in your organizations, making the commitment to invest in healthy buildings, and then providing direction and guidance at the leadership level. And that certainly is influenced by the work that you do and how well you can convince your bosses that this is the right thing to do, or that, you know, the facilities that you're designing and building and constructing can contribute to this. And, you know, there's, you know, many of you are looking at this, but I think that this is a, you know, kind of a further proof that this is a trend, and this is things that people are paying attention to. This is a summit that Modern Healthcare, which is the leading business magazine in the industry, is producing this week about ESG. And it's going to be attended by, you know, all healthcare CEOs and leadership. And this is the second one that they've done. So this is a trend that is gaining steam, and I think it's going to continue. And even though there has been some pushback on the financial world about ESG investing, that, you know, some people don't agree that, you know, and, you know, profits, you know, connecting profits to a social thing like ESG is really, you know, makes anybody any money. It's still, there's a lot of people that believe in it, and I don't think it's going away. Okay, so the third trend is longevity-ready communities. So by the middle of this century, living to the age of 100 is going to be the norm. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I want to live to be 100. I mean, maybe if I have all my faculties and I can still get up on a stage like this and walk around, but you know, it's something that's really kind of amazing when you think about it. This is a picture of Sister Mary Jean. How many know who she is? All right, a few in the audience. So she became something of this folk hero several years ago because she was the chaplain of the Loyola University men's basketball team that made it to the NCAA Final Four, and she went to all the games and everything. She's 103 now. And she just published a book. So, you know, people like her are going to be the norm. And I have an aunt and uncle who are 98. I saw them a few weeks ago, and they're still hanging in there. My uncle has some health problems, but I was talking to my aunt about how things were going, and she kind of said to me, she said, well, we didn't expect to live this long. But you know, folks, people are going to live that long and longer in the coming years. So, but yet our current institutions and our norms and our policies evolved when lives were only half as long. And you know, the hotel room that I just mentioned is not designed for the 100-year life. A 98-year-old person could not get in and out of that tub without a grab bar. Heck, I'm a 63-year-old person, I can barely do it. So, you know, as a society, how are we going to meet those demands? Well, to answer this question, some very smart people at the Stanford Center of Longevity did some research, and they came up with a new map of life that's guided by 10 principles that lay the groundwork for society that is now healthier, more equitable, and longevity ready. And one of those principles is designing or building longevity-ready communities. Now, I'm not sure that they meant building in the sense that we all think of building, you know, in terms of the physical building, but that's certainly part of it. And not only the physical building, but everything around the physical building. So I think to build longevity-ready communities, our buildings and neighborhoods need to facilitate active and healthy aging. And to do that, they need to be community-centric, they need to be flexible and customized, they need to be inclusive and empathetic, resilient and adaptive, and mixed use. Now, these are all things that you should be thinking about as you're designing and planning facilities that are going to serve an increasingly older population. And not just facilities, it's also those of you who have campuses. I mean, you know, you're part of your communities. There's an article in the magazine that's on the table about the idea of campus being, you know, a gateway to the community. So, you know, these are ideas that I don't think are going to go away. So the fourth challenge is workforce. Now, again, this was another thing that we talked about this morning, the group talked about this morning. And, you know, there's no, I don't have to tell you guys that the healthcare industry is facing a workforce shortage, which was not helped by COVID. You know, and still there's still some, a lot of jobs have returned, but healthcare employment still remains below pre-pandemic levels. And, you know, before the pandemic, there were workforce challenges. And so, you know, this was a problem that the industry was facing. So it's not, you know, it's not hard to see why workforce challenges are top of mind for CEOs. It was the #1 thing that came up in the survey that the American College of Healthcare Executives did this year. And so they came up with, you know, some strategies, the American College of Healthcare Executives, which some of your organizations are probably implementing. And these are all good things, you know, strengthen the workforce, you know, pipeline, support and develop staff, and, you know, but they're all kind of operational things. And I feel that there's another element to this that y'all should be looking at that takes this maybe to a different mindset. Because I think most people go into healthcare because they're intrinsically motivated to learn new things and take on challenges. And they thrive on being able to find purpose and meaning in their work. And now, I actually recently read an article about a study that had been done that this is kind of the case of everybody now, that, you know, where even sort of the younger generation, that's what they're looking for more than, you know, advancement or even a lot of money. It's you know, what am I doing, is what I'm doing purposeful and meaningful. But I think healthcare has a unique sort of blueprint, if you will, with that, is in that, you know, people go into healthcare to help people and they want to find that meaning from that. If hospitals and health systems imagine themselves not as enforcers of productivity, but enablers of purpose, then I think that's a way to tap into that motivation, which will help retain and recruit employees. So Gensler did some research on this a few years ago, and they actually did it with nonprofit organizations and why people work for nonprofit organizations. But I think the findings that they found really relate to healthcare organizations as well, because many healthcare organizations are nonprofit, and just from the nature of healthcare work. But this is a report that is free on the Gensler website, and if you're interested in learning a little bit more about some of the ways that they thought that the environment could be designed to enable purpose, then you could go to their website and find this document. So I think to design for purpose, I think you need to ask some questions, and those questions would be, what's important to healthcare staff that can tap into their sense of meaning and purpose in the built environment, in the workplace environment actually, and also make them feel valued and cared for. And this is not only the clinical staff, but also the folks that the group was talking about this morning, the administrative staff. You're trying to get them back in to the workplace. Well, what if you create, you talked about, some of the people talked about, how do we create a place that they want to come to? Well, I think creating places that do enable that sense of meaning and purpose is key. And so some of that, I think, is about bringing these kind of things into the design. Beauty and caring, fun, and obviously privacy is important in healthcare, particularly with clinicians sometimes when they're dealing with rough stuff. Camaraderie, people want to have that connection to their coworkers. And then obviously a sense of safety and security is important as well. And I might add joy to this list. A few years ago, I was sitting at a dinner next to a designer from the Mayo Clinic. And I said, well, what are you working on? And she said, well, we've been tasked with trying to figure out how to bring joy into the workplace in our designs. And they were just at the beginning of that journey. And unfortunately, I never followed up with her. But I thought that was a great idea, to task your design staff with bringing joy into the workplace. And I think joy can be conveyed in many of these things. Because every one of them can be reflected in the design of the physical environment. So this statement, I love this statement, which I think I actually stole from the Gensler report. Don't tell them. But supporting why people work in healthcare instead of how they work is really timely and very much needed. And again, think of that again as a concept, supporting why people work instead of how they work. I mean, that's where I want you to shift your thinking. And that's where I think, it's trending. And, we're all looking at how we create less stressful environments for employees, and have, the pandemic really brought it home that the frontline staff, we really need to support them more. And so it's great that a lot of you are looking at, trying to create areas of respite and so forth. But I think this is another idea that needs to come into that whole effort, is to really look at supporting why people work instead of just how. Okay, so the last one is digital technology. And, this is something that's been coming for a while, and we're all changing, and everything gets something new, some new idea comes along, and everybody starts talking about that. But, I think that where we're at right now is that, technology such as smartphones and social networks and internet applications are offering new ways for patients to monitor their health and access information. And so, this is leading to this whole convergence of people and information and technology and connectivity that is, everybody thinks, and I think it is, improving healthcare and health outcomes. So this is kind of how digital technology, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is driving, the healthcare delivery right now. But, I think there's challenges and limits to technology, mostly due to our own ability to adapt. We can't figure out how to turn the mute on or off on our Zoom calls, and but I think technology is making healthcare delivery more efficient and more cost-effective. And everybody knows this, but we're going to need new kinds of spaces to support that technology. And I think that the interesting thing in this statement here is that the one-size-fits-all healthcare delivery model may become a trend of the past. I mean, it already is, kind of, right? So, and by the way, that's interesting too, that there are current trends and there are past trends. So, there are trends that have longevity, and then they kind of filter out or peter out at one point when something else replaces them. So, that's I think true of the one-size-fits-all healthcare model. So, obviously, to connect with patients in meaningful ways, you need spaces that are designed for both, remote consultation as well as the ability to, switch between remote and in-person care. And I know you're all looking at this and trying to figure out how to do this, but I think, it's obvious that as digital technology continues to expand and evolve, we're going to need less space for in-person exam rooms in particular. And many think that exam and consultation rooms could also be constructed in the metaverse. Oh yeah, I said that word, the metaverse. Does anybody besides me not really understand what the metaverse is? I mean, we keep hearing this term, we keep, looking at different things, but what exactly is the metaverse? And I'm not an expert in the metaverse at all. So, but I found some definitions of it, and I kind of like this one. This is a definition by a guy. He runs some kind of technology company, but he's written a book on the metaverse. So he must know what he's talking about, right? But what's interesting is it's not a game, it's not a piece of hardware, or simply an online experience. It is a simulated digital environment that uses all these things that are mentioned here to create virtual spaces for rich user interaction. So, it's like the internet, kind of, and it is, or it will be, sort of this set of protocols and even technology and cables like you see here. Yes, the internet is made up of cables, and and also languages, and it'll all be enhanced by whatever access devices we're going to be using, whether it be VR goggles or your phone or something else that has yet to be invented. And obviously content, and it'll be this communication experience. And while the metaverse could become a key gateway to most digital experiences that we have, and even a key component of most physical experiences, and some even think it's the next great labor platform. But AI may be that, I don't know. But even if the metaverse falls short of the expectations of, I don't know, these science fiction writers or people like Mark Zuckerberg, it's likely to produce trillions in value as a new computing platform or a content medium. So some iteration of the metaverse is going to exist and keep existing and maybe evolve. I mean, I remember years ago we were looking at how we created avatars in virtual environments, and it was supposed to be the next biggest thing, and it really never went anywhere. Well, this may be it. I'm not sure yet. But the metaverse hospital, I don't think, is going to be mainstream for a while. So I don't think you have to really worry about this quite yet. But last year, a organization in the UAE called the Thumbay Group announced that they were going to build its own metaverse with a hospital, a medical university, and a virtual wellness domain. Well, and their idea is using virtual reality and artificial reality, patients would use their avatars to interact with the doctor in a shared virtual space. Now, I read the other day that because of AI, that may not always be a doctor, a real person. You could be interacting with ChatGPT about your health, or something like ChatGPT. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff floating around about this right now. Now, this whole metaverse hospital and so forth was supposed to launch in October, but I don't think it has yet. I can't find anything about whether it's launched yet. And but the reality is the physical hospital isn't going to go away, ever, I don't think, or the physical clinic. But I think what is going to happen is there are going to be more different types of experiences that are going to be online or virtual or whatever, that would not require somebody coming to a building. So, kind of back to the real world, I think building a physical hospital to support digital technology is going to require investments in people, technology, processes, and facilities. And you're all probably looking at that, but it's, and the challenge is that it's an ever-evolving thing that's happening. What's true today isn't necessarily true tomorrow. And I don't have any answers for that, but this is just part of the trend that I'm identifying. And, it's also going to take a shift towards a more flexible and risk-taking mindset, because, and healthcare has traditionally been very slow to adopt any kind of new technology. But I think that, too, is changing. So, because it has to, because technology is changing so fast. All right, so in summary, I've got 9 seconds left, but I think I can go over a little bit. I know, I love the little clock. I'm such a little rule follower. Oh, 1 second, I'm done, bye. No, so here's just to review the 5 things I talked about. Embodied carbon footprint, ESG investing, longevity-ready communities, workforce challenges in digital technology. Now, there's probably dozens more we could talk about, too. But these were kind of the things that are my top picks right now and kind of interesting to me. And I'd be interested to hear what ones you think are top of mind for you too, or which ones resonate with you. And of course, you don't have to hear it from me or from a fortune cookie, which most fortunes are terrible, aren't they? They just, they don't really tell a fortune. But change is coming. And I hope I've been able to give you some food for thought today and maybe take some of these trends that you already are seeing in your own organizations and think about them in a slightly different way. So thank you. And if you want to connect with me, here's where you can find me. Here's my email and my website. I write a blog and usually do posts every other week. So if you sign up, to receive notices, you'll get them every time something's published. And please, I'm also, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Thank you so much, Sara.